right, so burst my beta cells. We haven't done this in a while.
Right.
So I'll go first because this has been on my mind and really irritating me.
You even texted me about this.
Yes, I kind of sent you a long text about it because I just needed to get it off my chest.
And he's like a one-word text guy.
Yeah.
So when he texts like a big thing, it's a big deal.
Yep, it's important. Yeah, so seeing all these posts on social media from other diabetics and diabetic accounts about being able to eat whatever I want, I just have to take insulin for it. And more so in a rebellious attitude to normal society, thinking that you have to eat low carb or you can't eat certain things, and therefore in an act of rebellion or act of freedom or whatever it is, you say, I can eat whatever I want, and so you eat this big donut or you eat this big piece of cake or ice cream or whatever it is, and post this proud post about eating whatever you want. I just have to take insulin for it. Man, that really bothers me. Gosh. It comes down to what are your goals? Are you trying to be an advocate for your health, or are you just wanting to eat like shit? Because, and it's not like you can't ever eat those things. Well, for me, I don't. But
when was the last time you had a donut?
At least 6 years ago.
Wow. 6 years donut free. Go on.
Yeah. It's just it's not necessarily that you can't do those things and nobody can't do those things. It's more so making it a sense of pride. Everybody should do this because you can do this. You shouldn't be brought down by the man, even though in this scenario the man doesn't exist because nobody's bringing you down. It's just what is better for your health? Is it better for your health to eat better food? Because this doesn't even really have a lot to do with diabetes in specifically. It does a little bit because that does affect your blood sugar a lot. But at the same time, eating a donut isn't good for anybody's blood sugar. So why are we trying to make it a good thing to have this rebellious act to eat this crappy food just because, I can eat it because, I can just take insulin for it and it's going to be okay. It just bothers me to my core because, one, it's just very unhealthy, very inflammatory. It's going to put a lot of chaos into the system because in those things you have a lot of sugar, a lot of carbohydrates. You also have a lot of fats, a lot of bad fats in those things. And ultimately that's going to put a lot of stress, a lot of inflammation on your system. And therefore it can impact your blood sugar not only in the moment, but then through maybe a day, 2 days. For me, and I've told this story a lot with pizza. The last time I had pizza, that affected me for an entire week, both my blood sugar and just how I felt. And so to just champion that movement, it just really bothers me because ultimately it's not about your health. It becomes more about this rebellious, mindset of I can do whatever I want because I can just take insulin for it. It's not it's more so I would much rather prefer people to say, I want to choose this better food because it just makes everything so much easier for me, makes my health better, makes me feel better, and it ultimately, like we just talked about, for me, it makes me feel a lot more free from my diabetes when I don't have to worry about all this chaos and I'm constantly fighting highs or I'm constantly fighting lows. When my blood sugar is nice and stable, I can live my life. I can live my life the way I want it to. I don't have to think about it near as much, and I can just live my life.
Right.
Whereas if I have a crappy food, now I have to compensate for those consequences after that meal, the rest of that day, maybe even into the next day, because of that one decision. And if that one decision is based off of just somebody else's, societal pressure to you, you feel like you want to eat that just because somebody said, oh, you're diabetic, can you eat that? That's irregardless. You shouldn't eat that either, even though you're not diabetic. So yeah, I don't know if I articulated it very well because I'm just heated up right now.
That was great.
But,
it ends up being a a could versus should,
Yeah.
right? And people then, instead of focusing on could versus should with themselves, they're focusing on the restriction that somebody else is viewing them. Then it's then a point of that person is valuing somebody else's opinion of them more than they do their own healthcare decisions, right? So that's where it comes from. And so I agree with you. I agree with your sentiment. I can see the other argument. Ultimately, I still will back you up because that's what I agree with too. I'm not a fan of those posts either, and that communication as well. Now you can just take insulin for whatever you want, but so I totally get where somebody's coming from because especially when you're first diagnosed, it can feel like there's so many no's, so many restrictions, but until you start claiming your health back in your life, then you're gonna think only about what you can't do opposed to what you can.
Yeah.
And so if you're only thinking about what you can't do, you're going to have that rebellious attitude versus what you can do. And it said, yeah, I could eat it. I'm not going to eat it, but I could eat it, and then some, I don't know. So I get it for sure. So I'm right there with you with that one. In a similar way, my burst, my beta cells is about motivation in a similar way. And, this was... I'm thinking about this week who I had a interaction with one of my chiropractic patients, and he was asking me, I was telling about some of the nutrition stuff that I do with some other people, and he was like, oh, what got you into nutrition? And I shared, I'm type 1 diabetic, show my pump in my pocket, and he's like, whoa. And he's like, okay. And then we talked about him being diabetic for a while. He's like, man, I really need to get on that. I was like, at that moment, I know he wasn't ready. Right, so there's something called motivational interviewing tactics and all those old type of things to help patients make the right decisions and help them realize what they should and want to do. But if somebody isn't going to change, especially with nutrition, you can't push them to do it. And so he's like, I should. And I was like, well, what's stopping you? And he talked about it. He's like, well, I'm just preparing for it, but that's something I should do. And in my mind, I'm like, in that whole interaction, I was calm. I was allowing them, I was guiding them, and still pleasant exchange. But in my head, I'm like, you're not gonna freaking change. You don't have the connection. You don't have the why. You don't have the reason to change.
Yeah.
Even being diabetic should be enough of it.
Yeah.
But it can be hard, and this is for a type 2 diabetic, so it's a little different, right? Mm-hmm. But whenever a type 1 talks to a type 2. There's still this level of connection, regardless. But in my mind, I wish I could have just been like, why don't you see?
Yeah.
Like, you should be able to see the value of your health and make these decisions. So that was what was bursting my beta cells this week was, not being able to, somebody who really needed to change their diabetes in their life, but was just had no interest in.
Yeah.
And I just wish I could flip the switch for them, but you got to take that step yourself. You got to be able to say, this is why I'm doing it, and screw it, fuck it, I'm sick and tired of being sick and tired, let's get this going.
Yeah. I have a hard time with that too, as far as like, what can I say or what can I educate them about that may help it like click for them to be like finally like make that shift to get them over the hump to finally start making changes. And ultimately, like, it's different for everybody, and so that's why it's so hard to like motivate somebody or like get them, inspire them to make a change. But yeah, and then like the connection between type 1s and type 2s is a very interesting one because like there is like a sense of connection and somewhat of community, but then there's also some like animosity as well, because you have like type 1s that really in very few cases there's a reversal of that. And so like with type 1s, it's like almost like a life sentence, to where versus type 2, it's looked at as more of a lifestyle thing, and it can be greatly impacted by lifestyle, I'll put it that way. And therefore, if you can make that change and have the ability to make that change, like as type 1s, there's a lot of jealousy there. Like if me as a type 1, I'm like, man, I wish my problems were type 2, because then I could just, grind it out and try and make that change. Versus, type 1, you're kind of stuck there.
You're right. Wow. I would agree.